It is finally time for another obscure album review. XTC, Skylarking, let's go. Hello everyone, this is the Afrovenger back with another obscure/classic album review, and today's album is Skylarking by XTC. It was released October 27th, 1986. Some chart information: it peaked at number 90 on the UK album chart and number 70 at the US album chart. It was released on the labels Virgin and Geffen, and its singles were Grass, The Meeting Place, and Dear God. So without further ado, let's get this started. This little piece of obscure music history is actually probably one of the coolest records I've ever listened to. I heard bits and pieces of this record about a year ago, and I've always thought it was just really impressive and quite different for its time. Much of this album has to do with a splintered relationship, finding new love, and a lot of even deeper themes, but we'll get there when we get there. In spite of all this, the lyricism is in no way weak at all. By this point, progressive rock and heavy metal were coming to the forefront of the music industry using much deeper and more clever lyricism, and this album borrows much of the same idea. It's not heavy metal, but most definitely has a lot of progressive rock influence. This LP takes on a style of psychedelic pop, progressive pop, baroque pop, and new wave. It varies from track to track, but no track really feels out of place because of the style or the genre. It all coalesces in a warm, musical center. What truly blew me away from this album on the first listen was how the first track, Summer's Cauldron, transitioned straight into the second track, Grass. Basically, those two tracks are linked, and it was so cool to hear such a sudden transition that didn't feel awkward or even like it was two separate tracks. The first track dealt with a whole lot of nature and was so beautifully descriptive, such as, when Miss Moon lays down and Sir Sun stands up, me, I'm found floating round and round like a bug in brandy in this big bronze cup. Or insect bomber Buddhist droning, copper chord Augustus organ. It's crazy how much detail they apply to these lyrics. They do the very same kind of transition from the track Ballet for a Rainy Day to 1000 Umbrellas. Flawless transition for two songs about heartbreak. Now, while the first couple of tracks are pretty happy, the first track that kind of gives us a hint of sadness is the track That's Really Super Supergirl. It's also one of the earlier tracks to introduce an overall different style aside from the track before it, The Meeting Place, which incorporates industrial sounds, since that's one of its main themes. That's Really Super Supergirl really brings out the whole new wave side of the album with its drum machine and synthesizers. It's got some superhero themes, of course, but it's talking about how the singer thinks she's some kind of supergirl who can do all these amazing things except put their relationship back together. From the lyrics, I won't call again, even in a jam, now I realize you could be on a mission saving some other man. It's possible that she left him for another guy. The sadness doesn't stop there, however. The next few tracks continue with the theme of breakups. Ballet for a Rainy Day and 1000 Umbrellas, again, are linked. However, much in the same vein as the first two tracks, Ballet for a Rainy Day takes on much more of a nature type of theme, but still has a presence of sadness with its dissonant chords and melodies as it leads into 1000 Umbrellas, which is about how no matter how many upturned umbrellas the singer has, they'll never be able to catch all the tears he cries after his girl broke up with him. The transition itself is certainly worth more note, as this track takes on a pure baroque pop style with the only instruments being a string ensemble. The lead singer's name is Andy Partridge, by the way, who wrote the majority of the tracks on this album. On this track, 1000 Umbrellas, his vocals sound so emotional and furious. He sounds like he's on the verge of breaking down. It really pounds in that idea of being in such a harsh turmoil after a bad breakup. Really have to commend his vocals on this one. However, the other songwriter and bassist for this album, Colin Moulding, kinda sounds like Pete Townshend of The Who when he's doing his vocals, to be honest. You can especially hear it on the track The Meeting Place, which he wrote, of course. I love The Who and I love Pete Townshend, but let's just say that Roger Daltrey will always be the #1 vocalist of the group. Another Satellite is a very simplistic style with its percussion machine and various instrumental effects. It has a great melody, though. It kinda deals with how the singer is annoyed by a girl who won't leave him alone, while he's still in love with another girl. He's comparing this girl to a satellite, saying how he doesn't need another satellite going around him. Pretty nice analogy. Mermaid Smiled is more folk-oriented with its acoustic guitar and bongo drums, but has some elements of jazz that make it such an incredible track, absolutely one of the best on the album. The xylophone, the muted trumpets, the driving drums, the walking bass line, there's just a lot going on in this track, and it's so exciting to listen to. So much ocean imagery and tight lyrics as you would expect. The jazz influences continue on the following track, The Man Who Sailed Around His Soul. It has the kind of jazz you'd hear on stuff from people like Stanley Clarke, Marcus Miller, or maybe Weather Report. It kind of has a cool, mysterious, big city, noir-esque kind of feel to it. Really awesome track. Things switch up once we get to Dying, which is almost straight folk in its style. Obvious references to death, and perhaps impending death with lines like, I'm getting older too, but I don't want to die like you. To whom he's referring to, I'm not sure, but it's definitely a pretty haunting track, no doubt. Sacrificial Bonfire also has a folk style, but more of a traditional folk style that you'd hear in old villages and things like that. The instrumentals gradually become more intricate once a string ensemble comes in and slowly begins to resemble music from the classical or Baroque period. It's a really cool instrumental progression into something really complex, but by the end, it goes back to the simple guitar and various percussion instruments the way it began. The final track on the album, Dear God, is a track talking about how the singer doesn't believe that God would allow such terrible things like violence and disease to spread throughout the world, and therefore doesn't believe in God at all. Not an uncommon theme in the 80s, especially with the rise of metal and punk denouncing the existence of a god. The first verse is sung by a young girl who is actually the daughter of the producer of the album, Todd Rundgren, whose name is Jasmine Violette. Putting it simply, it's an atheistic song as the singer declares by the end that he doesn't believe in God, Satan, heaven, hell, or anything of that nature, and calling anybody that believes in that kind of stuff fools, essentially. As a Christian myself, it's not something I can really agree with when it comes to the lyrics, but musically it's perhaps the heaviest track on the album, as it's displaying a lot of anger and emotion. However, even though he's denouncing the idea of God, at the same time it's like he's calling out to him, saying that if he does exist, to show him a sign of his existence. It's more agnostic, really, and he wants to believe that God is real, but he finds it hard to, given the circumstances. Super deep. With this track, the album comes to a close. Overall, this is an amazing album. I can't really say that it's ahead of its time because of a lot of music during this period was experimenting with a lot of the same stuff, and many bands are doing it before XTC was doing it. However, that doesn't keep it from being a fantastic album. The instrumentation is great, the themes are really detailed both instrumentally and lyrically, and the songs are just really cool to listen to. Albeit many of the tracks are somewhat sad and the lyrics aren't always easy to understand, I think the music itself is what's important for this album above all else. My favorite tracks were Summer's Cauldron, Grass, That's Really Super Supergirl, Ballet for a Rainy Day, 1000 Umbrellas, Season Cycle, Big Day, Mermaid Smiled, The Man Who Sailed Around His Soul, and Sacrificial Bonfire. I recommend this album to anyone who's into progressive rock, progressive pop, sunshine pop, baroque pop, psychedelic rock, psychedelic pop, and new wave. Also, word of note, the lead singer Andy Partridge, his son is Harry Partridge, a YouTuber I've actually been following for quite a while. He's an animator, and I love his cartoons. I just thought that was really cool. Anyways, that does it for this another album review. I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you all for watching, and if you did enjoy, please hit that like button and also subscribe if you want to see more. And if there's a song or an album that you want to see reviewed on this channel, leave a comment down below, or check out my Facebook or my Twitter. The links are in the description. But thank you all again for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. So long.